Welcome to Global Morning.
The death toll from flooding.
Most time our politicians just bring in policies too, for sure.
Incidentally, we have several more stories.
The legislature was carefully crafted to
22.2% inflation rates as of April this year. What does that say about where we are as a country?
I think Nigeria has resorted to being resilient.
Before you call the police station, before they even leave, they'll take permission from
I don't think there's really anything on ground to improve.
the struggle, the ASU strike.
You have done your work, you have put us to the wall. We are not your slaves. I'm not a small boy.
All right, welcome back from the AM News. You're still watching Africa's Finest Breakfast Show, Global Morning on Global Television. And it's from the newsroom. Let's enter somewhere that is all about aroma and something beautiful. Talking about taste and texture. Yeah, that's a segment of the Global Morning that makes you want to eat all the nice things in the world. Do you love food?
Is that an understatement? Of course, I love food. Good food, not just any kind of food. It has to be delicious. I like that. But I don't think that's what we're going to be looking at this morning.
Okay, so what's on the menu?
Well, you have to stay glued to your TV set and let's find out.
All right, let's see what the taste and texture has in store for us this morning.
Hello and welcome to Taste and Texture segment. I am Chunk Annamel Joseph. Waking up every morning with the thoughts of eating something hot, spicy, fast, crunchy and affordable. Akara. It is called kose in the northern region of Nigeria. To make it fashionable, some call it bean cake. The recipe was introduced by enslaved people from West Africa and can still be found in various parts in Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Mali, Gambia, Burkina Faso, and Sierra Leone. Have you ever combined it with that bread for the special akara sandwich? Yummy! Akara is a delicious snack and a popular breakfast staple in Nigeria, popularly found on the roadside. It is called kose in Ghana or black-eyed pea fritters. This recipe is one of the easiest vegetarian or vegan-friendly Nigerian foods. Akara is a good source of proteins, vitamins, and minerals such as calcium, iron, and zinc. Ever wondered how you can make that easy on-the-go crunchy snack? The preparation of akara follows a relatively simple process. It's all about getting the right texture and taste from the beans mixed with the ingredients. Let's show you how to make the best akara that is fluffy, pillowy, and delicious. Get your black-eyed beans, soak it for 1 to 2 hours, remove the coat and blend it into a paste. Add your pepper, onions, crayfish if you like, totally optional. Vegetable oil is generously added to the pan as the akara needs to be deep fried. This oil is allowed to heat up. When the oil heats up, the paste is added with a spoon to achieve that akara round shape. The akara is now fried till it becomes golden brown. Now your delicious akara is ready. To enjoy it even better, it can be served with akamu, custard, agidi, or bread. The best bread to eat akara with is oven fresh, hot and stretchy bread like agege bread. Making akara may seem like a rocket science, but with practice, you will perfect this recipe. If you do not get it right the first time, try again and again and again. Everybody has the same first experience with making akara. This crunchy delicious snack is sold at roadsides and enjoyed by many.
All right, taste and texture. I already feel like eating kose now. It's I know one man who loves eating kose. Funny enough, he's not from the northern part of Nigeria, but he loves kose enough. And I know after this show, I'll get a query for it. But I've got my boss in the studio. Okay, nice to have you join us.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Anthony, I'm sure you had a great weekend. I mean, with all of the reflections around human rights and how much or how far we've come with that conversation, right?
Yeah, great weekend in the office, at work.
I mean, you signed up for this, didn't you?
Yeah, it's fun always being on the global television. And we're about to look at all the big stories in the papers. As of yesterday, yes, we've talked about International Human Rights Day.
That's right.
But the sad story about the death of Prince Talal of Saudi Arabia, and also the big commissioning of the police agenda concerning police community policing, which kickstarts in Lagos today.
Yeah.
For you, we had the 64th ECOWAS summit opening yesterday.
Yesterday as well.
The President made some very interesting remarks. For you, which will be the takeaway for these two events before we kick into the newspapers?
For me, first of all, I'd like to start from the ground up. I mean, the conversation around ECOWAS and the session that kickstarted in Nigeria's capital. Of course, no doubts on the fact that Nigeria is pivotal to the sub-region, and our president, who, by the way, is the chairman of ECOWAS, has also been able to provide leadership very vehemently, very clearly in the last couple of months since he got into that office. However, it's in the middle of that, if you recall, that the coup in Niger happened, and it has redefined governance across the sub-region. So when that session started yesterday, I knew before it even got underway that Niger Republic and all of the narratives around the coup would make a very pivotal aspects of the conversation. Of course, we understand in the final analysis there are more sanctions in the offing for the coupists in that country. Of course, they had also proposed a 3-year transition plan, none of which ECOWAS says it's buying, because they say that time is too long. So they want a shorter time frame, and they want clear timeline as to how they want to transition power to civil government. However, that's not the only problem there. Recall that the president, Mohamed Bazoum, who was ousted, is still being held. And we're hearing several stories, exactly, house arrest. We're hearing several stories as to what is happening with him, what he's saying to the world at the point he had access to the internet, what he still has, we don't know. But one of the preconditions that ECOWAS has put forth to the coupists was, look, first and foremost, you've got to release this man. And then the second is you have to reinstate him. Conversely, the coupists have said we are also not buying none of those, because this man had been hell-bent on destroying this country, including its economy. And we are here to help get things on the right path. And if you recall, that also led to them ousting several companies, multinationals, including French companies as well. So for me, I think ECOWAS needs to show more example. I mean, the leaders in ECOWAS need to show more example. It's not enough for you to want to bark, so to speak, every time there's a coup within the sub-region. It's got to be such that we see constitutional government being encouraged. I mean, we see some people whose path to coming to power, all right, was unconstitutional, like, I mean, outrightly unconstitutional. But today they sit on the council of ECOWAS, and they're also making decisions. So it becomes a matter of do what I say. And what I do. But I want to see exemplary leadership in such a way that's very sterling.
Still talking about the Niger, we had the lawyers, Niger representative lawyers, tell ECOWAS that they seem to have taken more sanctions on Niger than they did to Burkina Faso.
And Mali, for example. Mali.
Do you agree to that narrative that it seems like ECOWAS is hitting hard on Niger more than other African countries because of its financial strength?
You know, the thing is, I don't think I want to delve into those dynamics around who is more sanctioned, whose sanctions are weightier or weightiest. Yeah. I think it's more of, have we had consistency in the way we mete out penalties? Is ECOWAS even clear as to in what specific ways a coup should be responded to? For example, if there's a coup in country A, how do you respond vis-a-vis when there's a coup in country B? Because ultimately, human beings will want to look at when it happened the other time with XYZ, how did you respond? Why is our penalty different? Of course, countries thrive on interest, as we are told in international relations. So it's about interest first before you look at morality and law and so on and so forth.
All right, well said. All right, we'll go for a very quick break. When we return from the break, we'll be looking at the big stories making the rounds in Nigeria's national dailies. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Africa's Finest Breakfast Show, Global Morning on Global Television. It's now time, that segment where we look at the big stories making the rounds in Africa's biggest black nation, Nigeria. And we'll begin with, we've got the Leadership newspaper. First, we've got big headlines there. Why Nigeria is going down. If you want to know why, you have to get a copy of the Leadership newspaper. And the picture story of the Person of the Year 2023 is not a person but the president of the biggest black nation in the world, President Bola Tinubu. And do you think he deserves the Person of the Year 2023 because his ambition came to pass, or do you think he deserves it?
You know, I looked at the elements associated with determining who is the best person, the man of the year, the XYZ of the year, whether it's Time 100, whether it's other sort of platforms and Forbes and so on and so forth. In the case of Forbes, I think it's more of a straightforward thing because they're looking at your net worth, they're looking at how much of impact you're making in your sector, whether it's tech or business, lifestyle, whatever it is, right? But I do know that most times when they say man of the year, especially when you look at it from the Times 100 perspective, I mean, how do you explain that Putin is called man of the year? How do you explain that Osama bin Laden will be referred to as one of the 100 most influential people in the world and stuff like that? We have had fine Nigerians also making that list, for example. But when we bring it down to our president, Bola Tinubu, the question is, what metrics did they use in determining that? He has been very influential, whether you like it or not. You know, when these things are done most times, Tony, the people who do the ranking try as much as they can, even though we know human beings are inherently flawed, to be dispassionate about it. So they're looking at how they have influenced a certain space, how much they have changed very drastically a certain narrative. For example, let's backtrack a little in the run-up to the general elections last year, especially when you look at the presidential angle of it. President Bola Tinubu was in the news almost every other day. So you would hear, I mean, you will see memes across social media platforms that had to do with him. In fact, at the point we heard Tinubu dance and so on and so forth. I mean, these things didn't just come through the cracks of the sky. They were events that led to them. And he was, for want of better, was a protagonist in all of those events. Recall, too, that there was a time a certain television station put up a debate for presidential candidates. He refused to come, and he never apologized for it. He said, I've got my own method of campaigning and putting the word out about the agenda I want to pursue for Nigeria, which is now the Renewed Hope agenda. So when you look at all of this and how, if you like, unconventional, unorthodox, that his methods have been, whether it was before, during, or after the elections, you realize that, who knows, he's probably just the man of the year.
All right, we'll give it to our president, man of the year. All right, let's move on to the next newspaper. We've got This Day is next up for review. Let's see the big stories making the rounds this day. We've got ECOWAS leaders says it's time to activate counter-terrorism standby force. That's what ECOWAS is saying. Access Bank UK receives approval to commence operations in Hong Kong. Big stripe there. Then we've got senators that donate 109 million naira to Kaduna bombing victims. That's big headlines there. Let's look at you. A while ago, you talked about ECOWAS backing but not biting. Do you think they're finally waking up? Now they're saying it's time to have a standby counter-terrorism force. I thought we had the ECOMOG force. Shouldn't just change of name like we have the Nigerian Correctional Service, but the same old thing.
You see, we've got to move, Tony, past nomenclatures and begin to look at issues and substance, then ultimately impacts. People are not so concerned about what the name is. They are more interested in what impact it's going to make. How much of the problem will the initiative solve? That's the concern. For ECOWAS, for example, when you talk about these things, they are basically in theory. All right, people want to see the results. For example, how much of cohesion do you have amongst ECOWAS nations? In other words, how much of integration, how much of cooperation do the heads of government across the sub-region enjoy? Of course, we saw a bit of that in fairness to former President Muhammadu Buhari with Chad, with even this Niger Republic. Of course, that was far before the coup, and so on and so forth. But did we sustain it? Have we been consistent? And going forward, you need to realize that terrorism is also dynamic. It evolves. Are we also evolving with it? It's not enough to have a standby force. How equipped will the force be? Will the force be adequately funded or be underfunded?
All right, because we saw when Nigeria, Niger, Chad were supposed to fight Boko Haram.
That's right.
And it was only Chad fighting the Boko Haram.
And so what happened to Nigeria and Niger?
When they won the war, they left to the other countries.
Right.
Well, let's hope ECOWAS will get it right. But let's look at, we've got senators donating 109 million naira for victims of the Kaduna bombing. Should they always wait for something negative to occur before they reach out to the vulnerable population? Is this not just PR by the lawmakers?
I think, again, Tony, you and I have had this sort of conversation time and again. I think it's basically the, if you like, wait and see kind of approach that we have to issues and situations. So we're not proactive, we're not pragmatic, we're not 2 steps ahead of situations, right? So in economics, they would say it's a knee-jerk approach. So you're only reacting now because you're overwhelmed, because you are at crossroads, kind of, all right? Otherwise, you won't do anything about it. We're not saying the senators could have stopped the bombing, for example. We're only saying that we've got to be deliberate and intentional about putting systems in place that help us to check some of those things. For example, we're still in a country where a Senate committee on maybe defense would invite the security chiefs and they decide whether to come or not to come. They decide when to come and when not to come. And the senators most times are helpless about it because, you see, this thing again goes back to the principle and practice of exemplary leadership. The question is, these senators themselves, have they lived above board? Are they respected in their constituencies? Are they popular? How did they come into office? Were they, are the processes that produce them not questionable? So these are basically concerns that we need to look at because you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah. All right, well, sir, there we're still looking at the papers in case you're just joining us. It's Global Morning, and we're looking at the big issues making the rounds in Nigeria as we look at the papers. All right, let's move on. We've got the Nigerian Tribune next up for review, looking at the big papers and the stories there. Nigerian Tribune says importers, exporters incur losses as exchange rate hike bites. Review exchange rate policy, CPPE tells the CBN. That's the big headline story there. From the Nigerian Tribune, we've got Kuz is the writer there. Tinubu wants transition plan for Niger, Mali, and others. And Clark to Tinubu apply doctrine of necessity to resolve Ondo impasse is the big headline story there. Kanu Southeast Security is the writer. Ohades Ndibo to table key demands before Tinubu. And we've got cash crisis hits, anger spreads. Very disturbing there. Those are some of the big stories there. Federal government moves unbundling. Discourse, regional discourse is one of the headline stories there. Okay, let's look at Clark to Tinubu apply doctrine of necessity to resolve Ondo impasse. Is a very interesting headline story there. We talked about this issue about the Ondo crisis. Keredu not wanting to shift power to Ayed Datiwa.
His deputy.
Is it time for him to do that right now?
Well, I don't think it's time for him to do that. I think it's already past time to do that. Of course, they say better late than never. You see, these things are about, again, institutional. Nigeria doesn't seem at this point, quite frankly, to have institutional thinking on the one hand, then there's, if you like, institutional amnesia on the other hand. Yeah, because I spoke about this with somebody on the show here, one of our shows last week, and the question I put to that guest was, are we having, incidentally, this is an APC chieftain I'm talking with, yes, and I asked him, are we having a Yaradua moment in Ondo State? And he laughs it off and says, no, we're not having a Yaradua moment. Because how do you explain, for example, I mean, let's create some perspective quickly. The governor travels overseas for medical, if you like, attention. Yeah, of course, he's not the first to do that. Of course, he has the right to do that, absolutely. And then he returns after a few months. He doesn't go to Ondo State. He goes to Oyo State. Yeah. Then he doesn't stay there for a week, for 2 weeks, or a month. He's there for several other months. As we speak on this show this morning, this is the 11th day of December 2023. He's not back to Akure, the state capital. One would have thought, because the Constitution is very clear as to what happens under these exact circumstances, that power is transmitted to the deputy. Of course, that transmission of power should have happened already before you left the country. We were told he did. Of course, there was also back and forth around whether he should or he shouldn't. You see, this is not a conversation you have if you want to be a serious country, and in this case, a serious state. The man has been away for excess of 6 months. His deputy is being dragged, as they say on social media. And now it becomes a tussle between his deputy and the House of Assembly in that state. As of today, we are now hearing about forgery from the governor's camp. And the House of Assembly says we are not going to probe, we're not going to look into it, and so on and so forth. At some point, they even dragged the chief judge of the state into the narrative because the judge was being, if you like, being coerced to set up all the mechanism, judicial mechanism, to see to the impeachment of Lucky Aiyedatiwa, the, if you like, 2IC to Governor Akeredolu. But I'll tell you what my concern is before we wrap it up. My concern is that Governor Akeredolu is not just an educated man. He is a brilliantly educated man. He is a senior lawyer. He is a former national president of the Nigerian Bar Association. What more can I say?
Is it not more sad that the president went into this matter, but instead of going with the Constitution, he was telling Lucky Aiyedatiwa that he seems to be more interested in becoming the acting governor rather than, you know, serving the people? Was the president being fair and sincere in that decision he took?
I'll tell you, that report itself had also agitated my mind. Of course, this was a meeting that was held behind closed door. We only saw footage of when the gentleman came in. President had a handshake with them, and that was the much that we saw. But if I were to read behind the line, I mean, between the lines, yes, and look through the nuances, as they call it, I could tell that there was a bit of a bad blood between the president and the deputy governor, mostly coming from the president's end. Because there's a history to all of this. The governor of the state is the president's friend. I use that word advisedly, quote unquote. I mean, Akeredolu is the president's friend. And you know, in Nigeria, we have a way of putting certain considerations over the Constitution. Yes, friendship, partisan affiliation, religion, tribalism, ethnism, region, and so on and so forth, all right? So that's why you hear things like, even if the governor is a thief, living for us is our thief, at least it comes from our region. So that probably is a consideration for the president. I'm not in the president's mind, so I can't speak his mind on this show or anywhere. But I do know for a fact that the president probably, if there's any truth in that report, the president probably got ahead of himself. Because the question the president should have been asking both Aiyedatiwa and his principal, the governor, is what does the Constitution say? At least the governor is a lawyer. Let him interpret it to the president. What does the Constitution say about this kind of situation where you've been away from your state for the past 6 months? What are we supposed to do? It's not about whether the deputy governor wants to serve the state or not. It's about in what capacity. We have to be clear about capacity. In what capacity? I mean, you are here as a show anchor, for example. Why are you not swinging the door? Why are you not driving the vehicle? Why are you not the one doing the work of the janitor, for instance? Because this is your role. So we know the capacity in which you're serving, and we know where to hold you accountable. The same thing goes for everybody who works at Global Television. So for the president, I think there could have been a more excellent way to provide leadership under the circumstance.
Very sad commentary there, but let's move on. We have some other interesting talking points. Let's look at this majorly. Concerns the Southeast, where the big story here from the Nigerian Tribune says Kanu, Southeast security is the writer there. It says Ohanaeze Ndigbo to take table key demands before Tinubu. Let's look at this story about Kanu. Do you think it's safe to have that man out behind bars, out, or do you think Ohane Ndigbo is playing to the gallery? Because in one breath, they seem to support the federal government stand in letting him be behind bars. Or on the flip side, you see them talking for Kanu. Later, it seems like against Kanu. Are the governors and that socio-cultural group really doing this for the interest of Nigeria?
Okay, I think we should start from the home front, because they say charity begins at home and justice from the next door. The first question, Tony, perhaps should be, Ohane Ndigbo, that's the apex socio-cultural group of the southeast of Nigeria. I mean, a region that is so pivotal to the sustenance, to the growth of this country. In alliance, in tandem, in consonance with the governors, because on many salient issues, I don't even see the 5 governors of that state being in alliance with themselves. So the question is, can we say very confidently, very categorically, that the 5 governors of the Southeast, regardless of their political affiliation and their partisanship, are right, on same page as Ohane Ndigbo? I'm not so sure, given the narratives that we're seeing, especially where it has to do with the issue of Kano and so on and so forth. But let's talk about Kano for a minute. Kanu has been behind bars for a long time. Of course, at the point he was granted bail by Justice Binta Nyako, jumped bail, got arrested in Kenya, brought back to Nigeria, and so on and so forth. So we know how all of that played out. As of today, he's still behind bars. We'll see him go to court again and again and again. In fact, on days that Kanu is taken to court, it's almost like some sort of commemoration in Nigeria. And then we also need to look at the implications in the Southeast. Sit at home every other Monday, how that has grounded economic activities, and ultimately, by implication, the economic progress of that region and all the states within it. As for Ohane Ndigbo, they had also called severally, even long before President Tinubu came into office, that look, we should seriously consider political solution to the Kano problem, because if we say let's go the way of the judiciary, let's go the way of the legal system, we may just be up all night in a manner of speaking. So let's find a political solution. I have also spoken in the last 3 years with a lot of people within the judicial space about how do we find closure to this Kano problem, and they say Buhari government, as it then was, should find a political solution. But nobody has really been clear with regards to the specifics, the fine details of what the political solution should be, because whether you like it or not, there's still going to be the legal strand, that legal plank, whether or not you want to bring a political solution.
But in a straightforward answer, do you think he's of danger to the Nigerian people if he's let out of jail? Because if while he's behind bars, he could cause so much issues for the people.
Which he has also denied anyway. He has denied that he's not the one behind them. That there are some criminal elements in the Southeast that are giving the wrong impression that he is the one behind them. So if the man says he's not the one behind them, the question is, does the DSS, for example, have credible information that he's the one behind them? Does the military intelligence have credible information? Does the police have credible information? So those are the issues. So if the man says he's not the one, I don't think I have the capacity to determine whether or not he's the one. So it depends on what information and the credibility of that information that the law enforcement has with regards to this issue. However, Kanu again must realize that you can't be pursuing peace, on the one hand. On the other hand, you are also perpetrating violence. It doesn't work. You can't have both at the same time. My people say you can't whistle through your mouth and your nostrils at the same time. I mean, that's very profound. So he needs to realize that. He needs to realize that every human being, including himself, must be held accountable for whatever crimes they perpetrate against a government or a community. And Kanu must understand that the Nigerian government also has all it takes, all right, to deal with this issue once and for all. It's very important. He must know that there is law in the country. If you say you want secession, for instance, we all understand how it works. I mean, there was a time, for example, there was call for memorandum. In the UK, for UK to leave. The EU. Yeah. That was what led to the birth of the Brexit. And then, if you remember, David Cameron, who was the sitting prime minister, said, "Well, I wouldn't want us. I mean, if I had my way, if it was up to me, I wouldn't want the United Kingdom to leave the EU. However, this is not about me." Again, that's where Nigerians miss it. It always has to be about the president, the governor, the Senate president, the Oga Pata. The man says, it's not about me, so let's go to referendum. And if the side that says we want to leave EU wins, I will resign. Of course, the rest is history. We know what happened. The British people voted and said we are leaving the EU.
Yeah.
And that was how the man left office. He didn't steal money. He didn't abuse office. But in Nigeria, you have to, in fact, there's no reason for you to even leave office.
All right, well said. We're still looking at the papers. Let's quickly, one more paper before we probably call it a wrap on this segment of a newspaper review. Let's look at The Guardian, what The Guardian has in store for us, and give some highlights. All right, 6 months on, Tinubu's net worth unknown, CSO kick is the big headline story there. And we've got $7 trillion yearly funding worsening climate land crisis. Report finds ECOWAS team negotiates with Niger on return to civil rule and time to reorganize and adapt state policing is a big story. We told you the president, it's going to kickstart the policing agenda concerning community policing in Lagos State today, and he'll be doing that across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. 109 senators donated December pay to the Mbiri drone victims. Hopeful it's going to make them have better Christmas. We've got federal government secures 100 electric buses from Owando. Is the big story there. All right, let's just look at 6 months on Tinubu net worth unknown CSO's kick asset declaration. This issue of asset declaration has been caused a lot of uproar in the past 3 administrations, but they seem to not do what the Constitution says. Come out and tell us how much you're worth, what your assets before you take office. But we're not seeing that. We didn't see that happen.
It's interesting. This is the 11th day in the month of December 2023. Recall that President Bola Tinubu was inaugurated on the 29th of May. So give or take, we're looking at a president who has been in office now for virtually 7 months. The question is, what are the bottlenecks? What are the factors stopping the president from declaring assets? We were almost going to have the same issue when we had former President Muhammadu Buhari in office, but we know that the president did declare his assets, and then his vice, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, also followed. And we saw the core elements of those declarations at that time. We also saw in this country how someone like former CGN, was, I mean, he was brought to the marketplace, for want of better words, over declaration, I mean, assets declaration, all right? Because at that time, the government said, look, there were discrepancies in the figures, I mean, in the details that he provided. This was not even a matter of him not declaring. It was a question of you having not, I mean, allegedly not declared, you know, appropriately, or if you like, very, yes, exactly, you know, very correctly. In this case, we're even looking at somebody who has not declared at all. So what could be stopping the president? Again, Tony, it has to do with leadership by example. You see, we live in a country, right from parenting, you know, where parents want their children to live a certain way, want them to do certain things, want them to, if you like, pursue certain values. But their parents, on the contrary, are not pursuing those values. It's the same thing we bring into office, because you don't change people when they come into office. The office just amplifies who they are, the values and the traits and the attributes that they are bringing. If the president, who is, as people will call him, the father of the country, the father of the nation, has not declared his assets, how then do I hold my state governor accountable? How then do I hold, exactly, ministers and legislators, whether states, I mean, federal, responsible, I mean, for not declaring their asset? What does it take to declare asset? I mean, Governor Seyi Makinde of Oyo State did that. Even the people were shouting that, how can somebody be worth 48 billion and still wants to be governor? That's a story for another day, by the way.
All right, so that's how we're going to call it a wrap on the newspaper review segment, and it's been amazing doing it with Uyi, looking at the big stories and getting very, very balanced analysis of all the big stories. So this is where I'm going to call it a wrap, and I'm going to drop the gauntlet for him to continue Africa's Finest Breakfast Show, Global Morning.